Hello and welcome to Queen Mary Questions, the show that allows you, the students, to ask prominent figures in Queen Mary whatever you like.
Hi, I'm Kerry Maxwell and today I'm going to be talking to Redwan Shahid, VP of Education at Queen Mary Students' Union. So in your manifesto you said you wanted to lobby the university for a compulsory Q review. How is this going?
So initially I came up with the kind of priority within my plan, so at least get restricted access compulsory for people who have specific access needs, but that proved more difficult than I thought. But now, although it's not all set in stone yet, for the new academic year, there's a more robust opt-out policy. So right now, we're kind of what the average institute does, where it's an opt-out policy. So everyone's opted into Q review, but you have to opt out. But the method or the process for you to opt out is quite easy for an academic. But what we're trying to move towards is a standardized opt-out policy where the academic has to inform the relevant people within the department and the faculty, and there would be an expectation on the academic to justify to their students why they're opting out. So hopefully that should be implemented in the upcoming academic year.
Study space has been a prominent issue at Queen Mary over the last few years. In your manifesto you said you'd like to lobby for more study spaces during peak times. What is being done to facilitate this?
So one thing that we've had quite a bit of success with is getting more social study spaces for this academic year. So if you look at some buildings like Arts 1, Arts 2, the Laws building, there's been extra seating and tables made available. There's been some extra provision for charging sockets. And I think from what I remember, there's plans to refurbish other social study areas for the new academic year. But something I'm trying to work on top of this is formal study spaces, so spaces within the library and how we can expand on those during peak times. But as it is right now, there are more kind of spaces for you to sit down during peak times and revise.
Your predecessor Mary Ojo used to talk about encouraging Queen Mary, University of London to bring forward plans for a library extension. News on that has gone quiet. So have you done any work on the extension project?
So there's good news and bad news. Good news is it's definitely happening, but and it's been budgeted for within the long-term capital investment. But we're talking about 5 to 10 years worth of kind of expansion because of, like, especially where the library is situated as well. It's quite, it's right behind us. But yeah, because of the location as well, in terms of how you expand, because there were talks of going upwards, sideways, like depending on whichever way you do it, there were problems about it. In the very short term though, there are plans over summer to give the infrastructure of the building a bit of, I don't know what the word would be, to make it nice essentially. So one kind of prominent issue is the sockets they consistently don't work. And that's partially because the infrastructure of the building, the investment wasn't met with the growth in student numbers. So as a very immediate plan, it's essentially to make sure the circuit boards and everything, they're up to scratch. So going forward, when they do invest in expanding the spaces, they can increase the electrical points basically. And I think a bit more short term as well, but again not within a year, they're hoping to redevelop the ground floor area. So because it extends into probably my successor's time, I haven't been as involved in the conversations, but partially because it hasn't really started, other than this is something we want to do within the next few years. So I'm hoping that the upcoming VP Educations pick this up.
On the library, this is a submitted question by the way, students have been told it will cost £17,000 to fix the library revolving doors, which still remain broken after many weeks. Would you agree that this is a wasteful amount of money, and would the SU to suggest proposing either a more cheaper solution or spending that on more traditional automatic sliding doors as a matter of urgency?
So I haven't been involved in any conversations where 17, like that figure particularly was mentioned. Automatic doors, I'm not sure if that would be the best of solutions, only because not we're wasteful, but the way the building's designed, in terms of heating and everything, and just generally, if it's automated, long-term maintenance costs would be a lot higher than a traditional revolving door. But yeah, having said that, I haven't been involved in any logistical conversations about how they would go about fixing it. But I think partially that would be my stance on it, where, you know, if it's one of those things that if it costs a certain amount of money, given that it's not a ridiculous amount, and we're delaying it because we keep conversing about it, I think getting it fixed and out of the way would benefit student experience a lot more than kind of delaying it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I haven't been involved in any direct conversations about the ins and outs of how they're going about fixing it.
This was a question to Ella, but we think it's appropriate for you as well. Will QMSU ever recognise its inherent racism seen in the full-time staff makeup, which is 90% white?
I wouldn't say the organisation's inherently racist, or like I wouldn't say anything like that. But having said that, an organisation of our size, not just in terms of the staffing structure, but the amount of students that we provide a service to, it would be extremely naive for me to claim that either we haven't made any errors along the way, not just within my year, but you know, since I was a student and I had interactions with the union, and there's definitely ways for improvement. So something that we're kind of exploring, how we can essentially make our staffing structure, or not structure, the body of staff more representative of the population on campus, especially because if we're advocating for diversity and representation within university, we should be leading by example. So one thing we are looking at is when we do advertise jobs for full-time staff members and student staff, how we advertise it, where we advertise it, the sort of language we use. So that's something we're definitely working on. But yeah, like I said, I wouldn't say that we're inherently racist, because if I think back to a lot of contentious or topical things that have happened over the last 2-3 years, I wouldn't say they've come from a place of malicious intent. It was kind of oversights which I would they shouldn't have happened, but I would classify them more as mistakes that we should learn from, as opposed to inherent racism.
Okay. This was a submitted question as well. What is more important to you, your relationship with the university or your relationship with students? At
the end of the day, I hold a position of responsibility to represent the students. So first and foremost, they come first, their opinions come first. And that's not just necessarily with, do I favour the students over university? There might be, I haven't had any cases so far, but there might be cases where I'm mandated to do something where I personally might not agree with it, but again, that's the nature of my job, to represent and advocate on behalf of the student body, and that's essentially what democracy is. So I think that's something we should be conscious about going into the role. It's not just what I want, I'm there to give students a voice, and that should be my priority going forward. So I think undoubtedly students come first.
You're like the channel for students' voices, but you've got to remember you're working within an institution. So
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's finding that balance. Similarly, another submit question.
Nice.
The Interim Vice Principal Education has been very engaged with and extraordinarily helpful to students, apparently. How have you taken advantage of this to benefit the students? What might it mean for the SU when she leaves shortly? Interviews taking place now according to Queen Mary University of London's website.
So to address the apparently, a lot of the successes I described earlier on, so the study spaces, another thing that I don't know if Ahmed spoke about, but we've been asking for lockers for commuter students for ages, and now that's a thing in Bancroft buildings, and they're planning to have more of those. A lot of these changes, they've come through someone in senior management essentially saying, hey, students are asking for this, we want students to speak to us, but when they do, we're not doing anything. Can we do something about this? So I think that's definitely been the element that's helpful. So there should be, from what I understand, an overlap between the outgoing vice principal and the incoming one, where they do like a handover process. And on top of that, I think all of the exec have been involved in the initial, not screening, but I don't know what this part's called, but we were essentially on call with the company saying these are the qualities we look for in a vice principal. So we have been involved in the process of the new appointment in some capacity or another. And one of the executive officers always sit on the interview panel. So I think all of these factors definitely help provide some level of continuation once the vice principal's left.
What upcoming campaigns and events are you looking forward to launching and announcing?
I have the Student Partnership Conference that's coming up early March, and that's meant to be for course reps and some other student reps, and it's a day-long conference with various workshops, keynotes, where they can feel empowered and be given the necessary skills that would sort of boost their confidence, equip them with the skill sets that they would need to navigate through various university meetings, know what sort of language to use to basically convince university, know what's going on within higher education generally to again make compelling, persuasive arguments. So that's something that's coming up. Another thing I am working on is a networking event for BME students and staff within Queen Mary, and again that's like late March, but hopefully the idea behind that is our students, the diversity among staff isn't necessarily matched with the diversity of our students, and that's kind of our USP. And I don't think there's like a very short-term solution to why there aren't that many BME lecturers. So the idea behind this is to give like sort of a role modeling effect for BME students to look at academics who are like them basically, and encourage them to stay within academia and pros and cons, how they would go about it, etc. So those are like two things that are coming up that I'm quite happy with.
And finally, what's been your highlight of the year so far in this position?
I'll pick two things if I can. I don't know if that's cheating. One of them is, so coming into my role, I wanted to do not necessarily a university-wide curriculum review / audit, but that's something I was interested in because I didn't think it was as great as it could be. And I thought it would basically take me the entire year to convince the university to do something of that sort. But I remember one of my first meetings with the principal and vice principal, and they were like, wow, great idea, do it. Do the entire university. I was like, whoa, that's too much. So that progressed really quickly, and I'm happy with that. And the idea is we'll pilot with 4 schools where we survey students and staff about what makes for an inclusive education in terms of not just the curriculum content, but how you deliver it, the support, the resources and the support that's provided around the curriculum. And hopefully that will get embedded onto a framework that gets rolled out university-wide in the new academic year. Hopefully I don't jinx it by saying that, but yeah, so that's one of the things. And I would say the second thing is the success I've had with student interns. So that's something I suggested to senior management, and they were quite on board with it. So instead of getting external consultants to come in and do research, we have a lot of talented students with lived experiences or context-based experience on what it means to be a student at Queen Mary, and we're pretty unique, so why don't we just utilize them? So they were on board with it, and initially we advertised 11 jobs, I think, for a week, and we had over 250 applicants, so that was great. And they want to standardize this essentially from year to year, so a more streamlined process where every year they look at what issues are being faced by Queen Mary students and how we can essentially hire students to do the research on our behalf, because it doesn't just give them employment and opportunities on campus, but it's a unique perspective that we wouldn't otherwise get. So that's something I'm really proud of.
And thank you very much. That's everything.
Thank you.